Hi everybody, and welcome to this second video in our DIY garden room build series. As you can see, we're back at the base from video 1. If you didn't already see that video, then you'll see a link up in the top right of the screen right about now that you can click to go watch that. There'll also be a link in the description. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. You know, it really helps us out when you do that. So as you can see at the minute, I am just sat on the deck marking out some timbers. These are going to be the kind of top and bottom rail for the frame. They're going to be used here to create the joists for the floor. Now I'm only using 3x2 because we are sat directly on top of the base. If we were using a different system such as ground screws or something else where the floor was suspended, I would be using thicker timbers, but these are completely acceptable because we are sat on a solid base. Essentially they're just going to be housing the insulation and having the floorboards fixed on top, so 3x2 is perfectly fine. And what I'm doing at the minute is I'm just marking the centres out on the timbers while they're laid next to each other. So the first one is going to be 380, so they all want to be 400 centres, but the first one should always be done at 380, and that means you actually hit the centre of the timber rather than running all the way to the end of it. And then everyone after that wants to be 400. So you can see here I'm just marking them out one at a time, using the square to square across both timbers, and that way each timber is identical to the other, as you can see here. So we've got markings on both timber, and then we can just move one to the other side, one for the top, one for the bottom. Okay, so once we're happy with that, we can go cut all the joists, and these are all going to be the same length. Our base is, you know, identical in length at either end, so we can just do every single timber here exactly the same. Obviously if you don't have a chop saw, you can do this with a handsaw. It's going to be a little bit more effort, and you need to, you know, take a little bit more time to make sure your cuts are straight, but it's not particularly difficult. There's only 11 pieces of wood to cut here, so you know, don't feel like you've got to rush out and buy a chop saw just to do this. Although there is quite a lot of cutting in this job, so a chop saw definitely will come in handy. You can see here while I'm cutting as well, I'm making a nice little pile over on the right hand side, which is also going to come in handy for noggins later on. So once these are cut, I'll just take them down, lay them in place using the marks that we made previously. So I'm just looking down the timber as well, just making sure that any bows or bellies go to the top. Thankfully these timbers were actually quite straight. So there you go, once we've got them all laid out, it's just a case of fixing it in place. And for this I'm going to be using my nail gun. So if you've got a nail gun, great. If not, hammer and nails, completely fine. Screwing it would be acceptable as well. And it's just a case of adding a couple of fixings to either end of each timber to secure it in place. Okay, once that's done, we're just going to remove it, and we're going to add a membrane. As you can see here, we've put a DPM down, and then we've pulled it back into place. The DPM is simply there to stop water coming through the concrete into the timber. It's basically separating the room from the base. I'm just going to check it for square here. So I'm just measuring from corner to corner. Obviously, if I measure from that corner and the other corner diagonally, they're both the same. It means the base is square. I already know that the concrete base below is perfectly square, so I just lined it up off that, and, you know, surprise, surprise, it was perfectly square. So I'm happy with that. So now we just need to fix the floor down to the base. To do this, I'm going to be using these brackets. Now, unfortunately, we do have to screw through, you know, the floor here and actually go through the membrane. We're going to have to drill through it. So that does compromise the integrity of the membrane to some extent. But what we're going to be doing to mitigate that is we're going to be using silicone in all the drill holes. So when we've drilled a hole, we're going to fill it with silicone, push the plug in, and then, you know, add the screw after that. We'll also be putting silicone under the plates as well and around the plates, just seal it up as much as we can. So for all intents and purposes, any hole that is made by the drill is going to be completely sealed up with silicone. So there's no chance of any damp coming through, basically. So for these plates, you can see me putting them, laying them about now. I actually readjusted them, and this first one that I'm just about to go and fix now, at the end, that's in the middle. I actually put 3 on the end there. I put 3 on the other end. I did 1 at the top and bottom, or the front and the back, should I say, where you can actually see one there at the back. And I did a couple in the middle as well. I basically used all 10. I had 10 that I bought, so I just thought I might as well use them all. But yeah, that kind of alignment, it made it really solid, and you know, the floor was not moving at all on the base then. So you don't really need to see me fasten down every single one of these, so you're just going to see me now basically screw this first one down, and then we'll move on to the next bit. I should add actually, I only put 1 screw in this one, and I did end up taking it off and putting another one in. So for all of these plates, I used 2 fixings in the floor, 2 fixings in the timber. Okay, so once they're all fastened down, the next thing is to mark out for the noggins. Now for these noggins, I marked them at 1200. The reason for that is the kingspan is 1200 wide, so I just wanted to, I didn't want any waste. I just wanted to cut the kingspan down the width and just use that to infill the gaps. So the noggin is just basically dividing each 1200. You can see here that I'm using a chalk line to mark the 1200s. If you don't have a chalk line, just use your tape measure and a pencil. I probably didn't save very much time at all using a chalk line, if I'm honest. Maybe a couple of minutes. So once you've got these all marked out, I have another little 1200 here as well. That's just going to leave a tiny little infill piece at the end. But once you've done this, you can basically measure all these gaps, which are all going to be very similar, but there's going to be some slight discrepancies, and then you can go cut your noggins. And then it's just a case of fixing the noggins, and again, 2 nails either end, 2 screws either end, whatever you're using. Following that, we can cut the kingspan to go in the gaps, and you can see here I'm just running the tape measure down on the measurement. To be fair, you know, that's one way of doing it. I don't think I even did any of the rest of them. I just did that for the video, and then I ended up just measuring and marking with a pencil and a spirit level, so don't feel like you've got to do it that way. The main thing here is just get the cuts tight, make sure they're tight, and make sure the actual cut itself is nice and straight. So you can see here, once it comes off, you can see that the cut is pretty straight there. And that's just going to mean that there's no gaps when it goes into the frame. And you'll see here, it's actually a little bit too tight, this. So I start tapping it in. And that back edge was just a little bit tight, so I just go and get my saw, and if this happens, all you need to do is just run the saw down the bottom back edge where it's sticking. You don't need to take a lot off, just like literally run it down the wood just to get the edge in, and then you can knock the rest in. So like I basically took nothing off that hardly. I just run it down the wood at the back just to get the back edge in, and then just knocked it down in place. And as you can see, that's pretty solid. You know, I'm having to fairly tap that in. And that's it. That's the way you want to do every single one of them. So you don't need to watch me do every single one. So we'll fast forward, jump forward a little bit. You can see here, I'm just doing the infill pieces. And again, these are easy. I just cut them in situ. And that's it. Once you've got all them in, you can move on to actually installing the floor. So here we go. This is the floor. It's kind of like a waterproof, protected flooring. I can't remember the name of it, to be honest, but I'll put some details in the description. So basically what I've done here is I use the circular saw and I just cut the end off, just basically cut the groove off. So there's a square edge on the back edge and the side edge. I didn't have to take a lot. It was about 10 mil, and that completely removed the groove, and I still managed to just about hit that 2400 timber. Now they don't have to be bang on the timbers here because they are tongue and groove, so they can kind of be floating they're going to be interlocking. They're using the, the expanding glue. They're going to be screwed. So this floor is going to be extremely solid. So don't feel like you've got to get bang on a joist, but it is better if you land on a joist if possible. So wherever possible, try and land on a joist. If you have to miss a joist, it's not the end of the world. As you can see now, I'm screwing it down. Like I said before, screwing is going to be much better than nailing. If you do nail it down in the future, you could have problems with like creaky floors and stuff. The advantage with screws, obviously, is they really bite into the timber below and get a very strong hold. So you're just not going to have that issue. One other thing as well, on the front edge and the side edge where you're going to be fitting the tongue into the groove, I usually leave them fixings until the next piece is in. So for example, now on that front edge and on that right hand side edge, there'll be no screws on, right towards the edge until I've like butted the next piece of wood in, and then the glue's in and I'll add more screws around the joint, and basically that's just going to tie it all together and pull it all down and make it really, really solid. Okay, so here I am with the little cut there for the end. So it's not quite a full piece, that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to line it up as best I can with the other one. We obviously want to get these to line through nice and straight. If we do that, then the rest of the floor is going to go down really easy. There's going to be no gaps. So it's worth just taking, again, just that little bit of extra time just to get these first couple of ones in correctly. Hence me getting my level here just to run it along the front just to make sure. Now the back edge is looking pretty straight, and I am running that along the base as well, which again we know is straight and square. But we obviously want to get this front edge right because that's where the next boards are going. So I'm just going to mess around with that until I'm happy with it. And then it's just a case of opening the gap up here a little bit. And we're just going to put some of this expanding glue in. This is it's like a 5-minute expanding glue. I forget the brand, but again, I'll leave that in the description below. And it's essentially waterproof. It expands in the joint. It really seals it. It's very sort of tough adhesive. So it's definitely the right stuff for the job. And there you go. Once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to screw that down. And then it's just a case of moving on to the rest of the floor. Oh, maybe not just yet. Just double check that that's straight. Yeah, so there you go. Like I said, you just got to make sure it's spot on before you fix it down. The thing is now that's completely lined through, so every board that I put down after this is very easy. They just go on in perfect line. There's no gaps. I don't have to mess about with them too much. As you can see here, I'm not really having to mess around with them too much. Anyway, I'm speeding it up. There's no point watching us do every single one, but you get the picture. Just glue every single joint, screw the whole thing down, make sure there's no gaps. And then you just need a nice square cut on this front edge, so I had to rip a bit down here. And I believe I put this first bit in down here, and then I think my battery's going to run out on my phone. But as you can see, there's the finished product, and I'm sure you'll agree, it looks pretty good. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one.